How many leaders have you worked for that made you think, I'd work for them again in a heartbeat? One, two, maybe more. Now compare that to the total number of managers and leaders that you've worked for over your career. If you're like most people, that first number is pretty small. Most leaders don't leave a memorable mark, but some do. And there's one thing that separates the leaders that you'd follow anywhere from the ones that you're just tolerating. And that thing is ownership. Today, I'm breaking down 3 principles from one of the most influential leadership books that I've ever read, Extreme Ownership by Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin. And these guys are a couple of Navy SEAL commanders, if you haven't heard of them. And these aren't just Navy SEAL tactics, but these are principles that will change how you lead, how you see yourself, and also how your team sees you. So let's get into it. Let's first ask, why do leaders fail? What stops leaders from making progress in their career? Now, I'd tell you, most leaders don't fail because they lack talent or skill. Most leaders are plenty skilled. It's what got them to where they are. But oftentimes I see leaders fail because they outsource responsibility. They shift blame. They avoid taking ownership. They end up blaming the team, the market, the timeline, the circumstances, anything but themselves.
We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah.
And look, I get it. I've worked in fast-paced and high-pressure environments. There are things that you genuinely can't control. You can't control the market. You can't control your competition. You can't control your team's work ethic, or the weather, or the current global political situation. But here's what happens when leaders don't take ownership. They lose the ability to change things, and they lose the ability to take action. They lose the ability to win. When leaders avoid ownership, you get some predictable outcomes. So there's confusion about priorities. You often get silos in politics, missed deadlines. You get teams that are just waiting around instead of acting. But when you practice extreme ownership, you get clearer decision making. You get faster execution. You get stronger trust with your team. There's less frustration and finger pointing. Now, the ownership mindset is a requirement for effective leadership. So let me break down 3 of the principles from this book that had the biggest impact on me and also the biggest impact on the leaders that I coach. The first principle is the one that the book is named after, extreme ownership. Here's what it means. If something goes wrong, you own it, period. Not because you caused every issue, but because you are responsible for the outcome. This is where people tend to push back. They say, but I didn't cause this problem. How could I possibly take ownership for it? Now, that's actually the wrong question to be asking. Of course, you are not the literal cause of everything that goes wrong, but taking extreme ownership means that you recognize you are responsible for the solution. If something is your fault, you own it. If something is not your fault, you first consider how it might be your fault, and then you own it anyways. Now, this can be uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable to admit to our own shortcomings, and it's uncomfortable to look at other people's mistakes and say, oh, I'm responsible for that. But consider what happens if you don't take ownership. We end up spending time looking for blame, and we spend time seeking the root cause, which is really just more blame. We spend a lot of time not creating solutions. And when a problem comes up, our team just wants solutions. You end up looking everywhere except in the mirror. Not only is this practically inefficient, but it destroys trust. Every time you dodge responsibility, your team thinks, oh, they're just looking for someone to blame. Anytime the leader shifts blame, it makes them appear weak. But when leaders take ownership, problems get solved instead of getting explained away. Teams feel protected, not blamed, and learning replaces defensiveness. Now, taking extreme ownership doesn't mean beating yourself up. That would be time wasted. It's not this endless self-criticism. But it does mean that we're asking better questions. What could I have done differently? Where did I fail to set clear expectations? And by the way, that is a huge question more leaders should ask more often. Maybe you should ask, what's my next move? Ownership shifts power back to you. It gives you control. Ownership gives you agency. And if it's your responsibility, you can fix it. That should be an empowering thought and not scary. So the next time you're confronted with a problem and you feel the blame monster rising up, take a pause and ask yourself, How did I contribute to this? Where could I have been more clear? Where did I fall short on creating expectations? What can I do about this? All right, principle number 2, decentralized command. Here's what's important to understand. Extreme ownership does not mean doing everything yourself. In fact, trying to control everything actually destroys execution. And yeah, the first book actually got a lot of questions about over-ownership. People swung the pendulum way too far. So Jocko and Leif wrote a follow-up book called The Dichotomy of Leadership to clarify where exactly the ownership pendulum belongs. Decentralized command means this. Everyone understands the mission. Everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. And then you set the expectation that decision-making happens at the lowest possible level. So why does this matter? Well, speed increases, bottlenecks are removed, and people feel trusted and capable. As a leader, your job is not to have all the answers. Your job is to create clarity and then empower others to act in alignment with that clarity. If your team can't make decisions without you, then you're not leading. You're a crutch. As a leader, you own the direction, you own the vision, you own the intention. But if you own everything, every decision and every action, what's anybody else going to do? How can anybody else grow? They're going to stand around and wait for you to make all the decisions. And as those decisions pile up, speed will decrease and you become the bottleneck. I'm sure you know, strong leaders don't hoard authority, they distribute it, and they set the expectation that others need to lead as well. Now, inevitably, somebody is going to make a bad decision. Someone's going to make a mistake. Now, in that scenario, who takes responsibility? Yeah, you do. Why? Well, because you're the leader. And because of principle number 1, extreme ownership. You're the one who granted permission for that other person to make the decision. Now, this gives you an opportunity to coach that individual. It's also an opportunity to reflect on how you set clarity and expectations with your team. You take the blame, you own it, you fix it, and you build your leadership capability as a result. As an example of decentralized command in practice, the Ritz-Carlton hotels gives their frontline employees a $2,000 spending limit to solve customer problems, no questions asked. Now, Ritz-Carlton has a clear mission, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And they have a clear standard for exceptional guest services and guest experiences. Management creates clarity on the mission and the standards, and then they trust and empower the front line to make decisions in alignment with that mission and standard. Frontline workers don't have to say, oh, hold on, let me go check with my boss. They can solve problems right then and there in the moment. Not only is this good for the customer, but it demonstrates the trust that exists between leadership and the front line. All right, principle number 3, cover and move. This principle is simple, but it can be difficult to practice given the modern work environment. Teams succeed when they support each other, not when they compete with each other. I know that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised how many organizations operate with deep internal silos and competing teams. I mean, as an example, Microsoft was notorious for this before Satya Nadella took over as CEO. Different teams would compete to ship the same products or have overlapping services, and it led to infighting, hiding information, duplicate work, wasted resources. But when Nadella took the helm, he made a specific change. He implemented this internal rallying cry of One Microsoft, and he meant it. Duplicate work was reorganized. Teams shifted, priorities changed. The whole company, slowly but surely, realigned to this principle. And since that time, Microsoft's stock price has 10x'd. So what does cover and move mean? Well, in the military, it's when one part of a group provides cover fire while another part moves across the battlefield. And those who are moving trust the others who are covering them to protect them. And in leadership, cover and move means this. There is only one team. That team either wins together or fails together. There is no us versus them within the organization or your team or your business. You are all in it together. Now, let me highlight a couple of reasons why this matters. First off, when you cover and move, you have better support and problem diagnosis. When everybody's working together, problem diagnosis becomes way easier. When teams fail to support one another, leaders will often misdiagnose a problem in the workplace as a people problem when it's really a systems issue. They might think, oh, this is going wrong because so-and-so is lazy, or that other person isn't skilled enough, or hey, they don't care as much as I do. But in reality, if you've hired the right people for the right roles, then the people are doing the best they can with the tools that they have. And people cannot outperform the system that they are embedded in. So, for example, if your team is being rewarded for not working together because different divisions have competing goals, then they're operating within a faulty system. Again, Microsoft in the early 2000s experienced this when their stack ranking performance system created an environment of us versus them. And leaders would withhold information from other divisions as to try to ensure their team had a leg up on others. And there were many overlapping projects and groups were hesitant to work together. However, in a system where everyone is working together, they can help you identify what the real issues are. Maybe there is a skill gap, maybe there's a systems problem, or maybe there's a gap in the process. Maybe there's a clarity issue. Are the incentives aligned? Is the leadership team modeling collaboration or rivalry? When you operate as one team, then everyone wants everyone else to win. This leads to support and it leads to more effective conversations and problem solving and diagnosis. But the second thing is trust. Teams that trust each other move faster and in tighter alignment because they're sharing information, they're sharing resources. They understand the mission and who's responsible for what. They support accountability. When teams don't trust each other, they don't communicate clearly, they're not sharing information, and they don't support each other. That is obviously inefficient and detrimental to everyone's goals. The principle of cover and move reminds us that leadership is not about individual performance. It's about collective execution. If one part of the system fails, the whole system suffers. Consider this for yourself. Do you want to go work for a team who is trusting and supportive, or who is selfish and non-communicative? So there you have it. There's 3 principles from the book Extreme Ownership that will change how you lead. Now, I believe there's actually 12 principles in here that are worth reading. But the 3 we went over: extreme ownership. Take responsibility for everything in your world. If it's your responsibility, you can fix it. The second principle was decentralized command. Trust others to lead. Empower decision-making at the lowest possible level and don't be the bottleneck. Principle 3 was cover and move. We win together or we don't win at all. There's only one team. If you want to go deeper, I highly recommend you pick up the book. I will throw an affiliate link down in the comments. And also their follow-up book, The Dichotomy of Leadership, is a great edition. I read them every year. Remember, extreme ownership isn't about self-criticism and being harsh to yourself. It's about holding yourself to a higher standard and taking responsibility. When you own everything in your world, you acknowledge your ability to change it. But when you seek to blame, nothing's going to change. Taking ownership is really the only way to move forward. So here's my challenge. Look in the mirror. Where are you avoiding ownership? Where do you catch yourself saying, that's not my fault? Where can you take responsibility? Thanks for being here, friends. I'm rooting for you. And if you'd like content like this delivered to your inbox each week, check out my newsletter. I'll throw a link down in the comments. Go crush it, friends, and until next time.